Oh no.
All right, we're going to get started. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming tonight. We're just going to talk about, so I'm Michelle Laubis, running as a write-in for Hardin County Commissioner against Fred Rush. I grew up in Hardin County, went to Ridgemont, graduated from Ridgemont in 2000, and have connections in a lot of the small villages, and now we live in Kenton. I have 4 kids, and decided that we needed some change in Hardin County. And so it's jumped in the race here this May after the closing of Hardin Hills. And so that's why I'm running. And today we are here to talk about the Sunshine Laws and the Open Meetings Act, which I find is much needed in Hardin County. We have major violations, I feel, that are happening. And the citizens need to know how to fight back and what to do and what to ask. And so we're going to just kind of go through it here a little bit. I want to say that I am not a lawyer. Do not take this as any legal advice. Do your research, know what you're doing. And this is the way that I interpret the Open Meetings Act and the Sunshine Laws. It's not always the way that the law will interpret it or the courts will interpret it. And as it's an incredible time for the Open Meetings Act particularly, because there's a lot of people with COVID and different government things that have gone on that are going after the Sunshine Laws, and they're taking them to the Ohio Supreme Court and getting rulings coming down. And so what has maybe been a standard ruling for many years, I think from the 70s, is kind of being challenged. And so they're going back and refining the definitions and getting more case law into the Sunshine and Open Meetings Acts, so that we know better how it's going to be interpreted. When you have a problem and you take it to the courts, you're going to know better, because there's paper trails, there's lawsuits that are out there, and so we can know better what to expect from a citizen's standpoint. So we have that, and so it's always changing, and what maybe has previously been understood has now clarity, and we can take that and kind of run with it. You know, when so let me just tell you, this one case, what I'm talking about, is Look Ahead America and Marilyn Rennie against the Stark County Board of Elections. So this came down on September 18th. Well, this one was filed several months ago. It went up to the Ohio Supreme Court. They came back, and Ohio is known to do plain reading of their laws. So they're looking at the grammar, they're looking at the definitions of the words, you know, those kind of things, instead of maybe other states may do more context or, you know, have different methods of interpreting the law. So we have plain reading. So they came down in this particular one at the Supreme Court that said this comma that was in the language was really important, right? So it's the executive sessions for purchasing property, and they found that you can't go into executive session until unless you have a reason that if you announce that you're buying property and it's going to give an unfair advantage to somebody, right, then you're allowed to go in executive session. If not, then you're not going to do it, right? And that comma made the difference. So the Supreme Court ruled on that, brought that down, and so now if you want to purchase property, it has to be because the executive session has to hide the information that's going to give an unfair advantage. Aside from that, you're not allowed to go in to executive session. You can't hide it just because you are buying something. Doesn't mean you're allowed to go in executive session. You have to show that it's an unfair advantage, and that one comma did that for you, right? So those are some of the things that are happening to clarify. So that's an end of the story, kind of end of the thing story, but we're going to go back to the beginning and talk about Sunshine Laws and Open Meetings Act, there's two different parts to it. They give transparency to our government. It's Attorney General's office. You have the Ohio Sunshine Laws. You can request this on their website. They'll send it to you for free. It's a manual that goes through and it gives you, you know, all the legal jargon on it, and then also the plain reading that you have there. And I don't know. Give that to Mike. You want to pass that out. So I'm passing out a sample of a simple public records request, and then some hyperlinks that you guys can use to go do some of this research for your own. But if you get this, if you're interested in sunshine laws, this is the manual that you need to have. And we're just gonna kind of go through it briefly. I'll give you this is the Ohio Revised Code 121.22. This is what they call the Open Meetings Act. So when we talk about that, this is the actual law that they're referring to. And it's written like all the ORC is. So you'll find this in here, but with a lot more explanation, right? They are gonna talk about maybe some examples in here, but this is where they're finding it from. And then the other one, the Sunshine Laws, is ORC 149.43 is a public records for inspection and copying. It's a little bit thicker. There's a lot more definitions about what a public record is. And it's also very weighty to read through. But that's what you're gonna look for if you wanna see the actual legal portion of it. So what we have, does anybody have any questions, I guess, on what the Sunshine Laws or Open Meetings Act are before we get started? Okay. So we're just gonna go through this briefly, right? So the very first thing we're gonna start with is the Sunshine Law, which is with your records. And what is a record? Right, it's a document that is used administratively for your public office, right? There are exceptions. So any document, device, or item, regardless of physical form or characteristic, including an electronic record, which would be your email, right? So there are some times where somebody will say, well, this isn't a public record because it's just for my own personal use. But if it's used as an administrative tool in the office, then it's a record, whether you like it to be a record or not, right? And so we did have that situation with the ARPA money, but I was told that it was not a public record, it was for personal use only, and I did receive that record because it was used administratively to track how the ARPA money was being used, right? So then it's like, okay, that's a record even if you like it or not. Sometimes handwritten meeting notes can be records, sometimes they're public, or sometimes they're for your personal use. If you handwrite meeting notes and then use that in the office, or you use that for reference of, to do official business, it becomes a record. If you're using it just for yourself and it's kind of just goes home with you and stays in your thing and doesn't come out again, that's for your own personal use, right? So it gets tricky when you talk of when something moves to a public record. Emails are a big thing. They're all part of our lives. And a lot of times you can say, oh, it's just email, or it's just a text message. Nope, those are all public records, right? So every time you email somebody, that's a public record, especially if you don't do your record retention and you keep that email, it's still public record, right? There is a way to get rid of your records retentions, that's legal and allowable. And so you should follow that, because then it gets some of that stuff off your plate. And if you keep it all, then you're liable for all of it, right? So one of the instances that I've had, so I've sent record requests to lots of people. I'm not gonna name names, and I'll try to, keep it pretty neutral, but these are all experiences that I've informed that the emails have no filing system, right? There's no filing system for the emails, and they have not deleted any of them, right? And the whole time that they've been in the office that they're in. Not a good practice, right? Because now you can't search for records, you don't know what's in there in your emails, so it's very cumbersome, but you're still responsible to get the documents that are needed, whether you record them properly or not. That's not the citizen's problem if you don't have any record retention. So not a good practice. I wouldn't suggest. On a side note of the emails, the Ohio Electronic Records Commission has a lot of great information that gives you how to file your emails, how which emails you keep, which ones you don't, how long you do them. And their sample retention is you have your different series, right? And then you have your years, and then you have another series, and you have your years. And when your years come up that one gets deleted, you just go in there in your file and you delete them. Easy, right? I mean, it's a lot of work up front to set that up, but so easy. So if somebody like me would say, I would like to have a records request for all the emails that go for ARPA funding, right? I ended up with 3 emails, 2 of which were my own emails. That was a record request that I said, I request the ARPA fund, the ARPA Excel document. So I got those emails back and then one other email. And, because that was the only ones that they could find that had ARPA in them. And that's insufficient. That's not emails related to ARPA funding. But that's what I got. So, the response I got back was, you want me to read through all my emails and find those? Yeah. If that's how if you don't have them categorized, then yeah, that's your responsibility. It's interesting, it's very clear in this, for all these things, that you cannot plead, I don't have enough time, or I don't have the resources to get your record request. No, you absolutely have the time to get your records request, because it states in here, and all the learning that you have when you are in office is you have proper record retention. You have them categorized and you have them done properly, which makes it easy. Your file system should be set up so that when you go to the file, you have it and it's accessible and it's not difficult. If you have made your job difficult, unfortunate. It is unfortunate, but not my problem, right? And so that's one example of, how am I gonna get my emails? I'm not sure, right? We're still working on that. It's a little bit tricky how we're gonna maybe word it a little bit different. When you're thinking about making records requests, right? These are the things that you need to know of what roadblocks you're gonna run into, right? So, one is being specific. I asked for related ARPA funds, right? But what I got were emails that only had ARPA in them, right? So you're only searching for that, which the one other email that I had that wasn't my own didn't even have the ARPA in it. So that was, what I was told was incorrect, because they obviously looked for something else outside of that one, those 4 letters, right? But that's not it's all about context. You should return the context related to those. So that's one thing to know. My thought is if I don't have my emails due on context, maybe you have to move to requesting all the emails to a specific person, that that person is communicating with that person, and you're like, all right, well, just give me all the emails. But that means who knows what you're gonna get. You're not gonna get just those ones. You're gonna get any of that correspondence, or text messages are great in this day and age. You can get the text messages for your people course, would be person to person. Well, you can do it by context. I think I've done that. You know, email, text messages, which means somebody, usually the prosecutor's office, I think they went through and had to read all the text messages to find out which ones were related, to return those, you know. It's not fun. It's a lot of work to sort through, because the prosecutor's office is there to make sure that you're not violating anything that's not supposed to be, you know, like if there's names or other things, non-records things, so they are evaluated from a legal standpoint, but that's a lot of work. That's why people don't really like records requests. They don't like to see them because it's a lot of work, but it's too bad. That's too bad, because when you get to a point when you need to know what's going on, that's the recourse that you have as a citizen, and it's a relatively free resource for that end. So, so we're talking about records, right? Any contracts. You can't get people's personal information. I mean, you can have names, you know, if you're an employee, right? But you get salaries, right? I'm doing a records request on all the salaries and payroll for Hardin County. Nearly done compiling that. I still have, I'm only allowed to request one department. I do it twice a week, one department twice a week. And so, it's taken a little bit of time to get that through. They said it was too broad of a request. So you have that where they're like, you can't ask for everything. Well, I want everything, right? It's too broad. You have to be specific. I feel, my personal, is that when I asked for the payroll of all the county departments, I felt like that was pretty specific. It's large, right? It's a large data set, but it's specific. So I'm not gonna argue, you know, I'm getting what I want, but it is cumbersome, because then we've come into organization charts are wrong, so the chart that I was using is not accurate, you know, so then you have to go back and you say, oh, you know, this isn't accurate, we get duplicates, and so then you say, now I need another source to get departments for our county. Well, then that one has, you know, some of the departments aren't used anymore, so then that one's a little bit inaccurate, and so we've had to really jump through a lot of hoops just to get payroll information from all the departments, you know. Yeah.
What's your goal or purpose in getting everyone's salary? I'm just curious.
Mainly the purpose is to see what the scope of our county government is. So I was having a conversation with the auditor, and he said that we had 480 people on payroll. And it blew my mind. I had no idea we had 480 W-2s, right? And I said, no way, that's incredible, right? So, and I'm kind of a big picture down to the detail kind of person. So it's like, I want to know, what are we dealing with? How big is our government, right? All the way. And the salaries aren't such a big deal. It's just a way. I've requested 5 years. So you can kind of see, you know, where were we 5 years ago? Where are we now? You know, a lot of our salaries are based on, like the elected officials, they all have caps. You know, they all have recommended, you know, agreed upon type, you know, for that section. So it's not necessarily to be nitpicking, you know, but it's like when you say, how big is our government? And then how much do we pay just on salaries? And then how much, you know, how many people are in each department, right? And then when you go to look at each department, you can go back to that and say, well, how many people, what does each of these people do, right? Because there may be people, and that's where it just gives you an accurate picture for that year, how many people were actually there. And then you can break down that one to all the jobs. Not everybody. Now, if you go to the engineers department, I know the hierarchy chart, their organization chart. Not everybody has that, so to say who all is involved, it's an easy way to get you a standing point. Here's the other part about public records requests that I find is very hard, which plays into this, is that you're swimming in the dark, right? If you're not in that job, or you don't have experience in the financial field, which I don't, I have no idea what to request, right? And you have to start somewhere. And so I requested, the ARPA money from each of the townships and the municipalities. So we're working on getting that, just because I want to know where it went. Where'd it go? It's easy. I feel like it's an easy question where each person, the money that they got, where did it go? And what I found is that most people have used it wisely, right? They've done big projects, they've paved roads, they've done things that are, beneficial, right? And you're like, wow, that's amazing. I didn't know that before, and now I do, just from looking at these ARPA funds. What you find is that everybody does different accounting. So I will get one request, and you'll get, this detailed accounting of the ARPA funds. You see all your invoices, no big deal. Other ones, they have a different format. So you don't have the detail, and so then you have to go back and you go, okay, I don't know what the financial word is for this report, but how do I get this report on this side, right? And so it's a little bit of a, you're just kind of going, because it's like maybe you don't know what you want to ask, right? Or if you have contracts, right? You don't know we're having the roof redone at the courthouse, right? And so you go and I ask, I would like to get this information. What's the bid sheet, or what's the document that says what they're gonna do on the roof? I don't know what it's called, right? So if nobody's gonna tell you, that's called I don't even know what it's called, right? Nobody's told me, right? Because sometimes you just can't ask for things, right? That, the one gentleman said that I could get a core sample for the roof. Now I have something that I can request. I would like to request the core sample for the courthouse roofs. If you don't know that, you can't request it, because you didn't even know it existed, right? So there's things out there, and so looking at how big the county is just gives you a platform to say, okay, it gives you a little bit. Let's say you want, you have a question, and so-and-so is working in this department, right? Now I can request, I want all the emails to that person, right? Or I could even, ideally, you just walk up to the person and you say, I'm interested, could you help me with this thing? Because I see that you're the person who has this title, right? And so it just gives you a platform in a world that you don't know what's out there, and you don't know how to ask for what it is you want. And that's where I think sunshine laws get really hard, is because you know what you want to know, but you don't know how to ask it. You don't know how to do that. And so we have records, right? There to request records, it's very easy, right? You can verbally ask for records. You can walk up, you say, I would like to inspect. So to inspect something means that they're just gonna hand it to you. I would like to inspect the contract, right? And they're gonna be like, here's the contract, and you can look at it, and you can read it, and you can say, maybe I want a copy of that, right? Now you can get a copy of it. Right? But inspecting it just means you're reading it. You're not changing it or doing anything with it. You can inspect a file, right? So I've requested to inspect files before, where, again, you don't know what you don't know. So I say, okay, I want to see the file on the fire pump, right? So you say, I want to inspect the file. They get the file out. You look at it. You can kind of look through the bid sheets or the invoices or the history that goes with that, one specific thing. If you want any of the information, great. If you don't, right, no harm, no foul. You just spent your time looking at it, right? So, and how I interpret inspecting a file may be different than other people. I would like to see, in a perfect world, that I walk into the office at a reasonable time and I say I would like to inspect a file. That file's easy to get. We get the file and we bring it back, right? That's not always the case. If they have files that are not public friendly, right? You might have to have the prosecutor's office look through the file, maybe, to make sure that they don't have anything in there that can't be public record, right? If the file's in a different location, that may take longer. But you should be able to get the file and see what's in it, no problem. You're gonna look at the file right there in the office. You're not gonna take the file anywhere, right? You're looking at it at the place that it's originated from. I've even read, which I don't know if it's true, somehow there is you're allowed to look at things on the computer, but not, so like you can't just go into their computer and like look around, but there's still something about being able to see. So one of the things would be, I want to see what the email folders are. How do you organize your email? But here's another part of it. They have to, by law, have a records retention schedule available at all times, ready for the public, right? That's a good place to start. So you say, okay, what kind of files does this office have, right? Because those are gonna be on your retention schedule. The one in the commissioner's office, it's not very helpful. I don't know why that is. I have a records request. I don't know how many records requests I have out there kind of pending, maybe a little too many. I have them and people are working on them. But you're supposed to have your own series, right? You should have your record series of different categories of work that you do. But the record retention series that they have in the office is very generic. So one of the recommendations is that they say, go look at that file and it'll help you know categories of things to request. But there's nothing on that. And so I haven't quite figured out that side of the record retentions for that department, if they're required, if it's just basic. So you have basic, let me find it here. There's 3 different types of records, but especially for email. Oh, it's over here. There's transitory, which are records that emails and documents that don't really matter. Oh, or you're coming to the meeting, right? Okay, great, you're coming to the meeting. So those are transitory. You don't really keep those, right? So they have that on their record series. Then you have general documents. That's for 2 years. And they kind of tell you what it is, and then they have substantive, which is more historical value type records. And those records are ones that you would keep, and you have to send them down to the state if you want to get rid of those, and they have to review them for history purposes. So I can't imagine what some of those are for our local government, that they would want to keep those for historical value. But maybe closing of Hardin Hills would be one of them. That it's like, this is, needed because of, the closing of the county home. I'm not sure. But that's basically it. That's all you get. There's no breakdown or detail. And so it wasn't very helpful. I didn't find to me to request documents based off of that record series that they provided. I am looking into that and have asked to see what the records series is. So we'll see what we get. All you can do is try, right? That's the biggest thing is you send an email and they may not like it and they send it back, and then you learn and you'll try again, and send another one, and the more times you do that, then the more you'll learn. And it's supposed to be, it's customer service, right? So it's supposed to be that the citizen and the public body is to work together as well as possible to get what it is that you're looking for. You may come in, you may not know, and you're like, I'm looking for this, They should be there helping you, guiding you, and doing the best that they can. It is frowned upon, so if you would take this to legal action, there's a couple of those that we'll talk about. It's frowned upon if they're not making an effort, right? Or if you're being unreasonable, like I want it right now, and and you're being mad and angry, that's frowned upon. Or if they're being obtuse, right? They want to work it out on your own. You can do mediation with the, I think it's the Attorney General's office. You can ask to do mediation, and that's where you would file with them, and you would have a confidential conference call with one of their attorneys, and you and the players involved would get on that call, and they would mediate. They would say, okay, we're having trouble getting this. Let's find out how can we work together to resolve this issue without going to court, right? We don't necessarily do that. So you're going to try and work it out, come to some kind of agreement so everybody's sort of happy, right? If that doesn't work, you can do a mandamus act. I think that's the one. I always get them confused, the sunshine laws. But you can go, I think it's $25, and you can file at the down at the state. You can do it online, and it goes through it goes through them, and you're basically saying, I didn't get my records request, and they'll look at it, and then they'll be like, yes, you have to give it to them, or no, that was unsubstantiated, right? But it's $25, and if it helps you get what it is, the records that you need, well then maybe it's worth going that route. You don't need to be a lawyer to do it. It's just in your plain language. That's the whole point of sunshine laws, is that you don't need any legal verbiage. You, like I said, if you have an email and you just say, oh, I would like your meeting minutes, right, for this year, that's good enough. You don't need to state your name. You don't have to. You can do it completely anonymous, right? So you send an email, and they're just supposed to send it right back, right? There are situations, if it helps them to find a record, that they can say, can I know your name? Can I help you? But you don't have to give it, right? But you may not get your record. If they say, I can't help you because you're not giving me this, and I have to have this to get your record. Like if you wanted something on your personal self, right, you have to give your name, because that's what you're looking for. You can have somebody else request it for you. You don't have to be the one to request it, but sometimes there is situations where you're gonna have to know, or to do that, and then you just have to weigh whether you wanna do that or not, right? And you don't have to live in the county. You can do requests, anywhere. They may say, what do you want that for? But you don't have to tell them, right? You don't have to give any reason, that they're like, why do you wanna know salaries? Don't have to tell you. Doesn't really matter. I just do, right? So the whole purpose, and then that way, they're just doing it. I mean, that's, I think, part of the drawback is that it's like, this is just being in public office. This is your job to provide public records. Don't think anything about it. It's not a big deal. It's not an offense to you. It's not that you don't have any duty for how those records are used. You do the job, you answer the request, and you move on. It's not a personal, doesn't have to be a personal issue. So anyway, so we're having plain language. You can do a verbal request, email. Now if you do an email request, they are supposed to respond in email, right? Or if you do a written request, they are supposed to respond with a written request, right? So whatever method that you're giving is what you should receive back, which kind of makes it, can make a difference on different things. And the other thing you can do is you can ask for, I know you will find in our county, that they want you to fill out a specific form, right? They're like, here, fill out this form, and I will get your records request. It has a spot for your name, your number, or, what you're requesting, da-da-da-da. No, you do not have to fill that out. That is not a legal document. They should not have that document. They should not be asking people to fill that form out, right? Especially if the request has already been done in an email. You do not need a form. You do not have to go into the office to get that, to make that request. The other thing they like to do is to charge 10 cents for every paper. It's 20 cents if it's double-sided, which is a little astronomical, considering that it doesn't cost that much, especially if it's black and white. And so, I personally will not pay 10 cents for copies, so I ask that everything is done electronic, right? So if you have a paper copy, I'm gonna ask that you make that, you scan that in the computer, and you send that to me electronically in a PDF form. That way I still get my document, and I don't have to pay the fee for it. I have requested, the sunshine laws say that you can only charge actual cost for records, right? For the actual cost of the toner and the actual cost of the paper. I have that. I mean, paper is maybe a penny, somewhere around maybe a penny, and toner per the current courthouse contract is 0.00025 cents per copy, right? So if you had 80 pages, I'm gonna pay you 20 cents, right? And that's what I'm willing to pay. Well, it'd be 20 cents plus 80, so $1. I will gladly pay anybody $1 for those 80 pages, no problem. I will not pay 10 cents. That's illegal, I feel, and you can't just make up your own rules, because so let's say our actual paper and actual toner is, costs, it has that nominal cost, right? Your penny and some fraction. Anything above that, your other 9 cents goes to labor, right? That's your labor cost, right? You can't charge me for the, cause that's what they said, is that they wanted to charge me for, that it's $40 a month or whatever to have the copier and the printer. That's overhead. Your office already pays that. That's not the actual cost. So you can't include that, right? So if anything above that actual cost is labor, and that's strictly prohibited in sunshine laws, not allowed. So, I've not received any remedy for that as of yet, but we're still working on it.
Who decides that? The prosecutor? Of the cost of the copies?
Well, so far it is determined by department. So each department can determine, they feel they can determine what they want to charge people. And like I said, I've already have the contract for the copier, but since I don't do a lot with copies, we haven't had an instance where that can necessarily be pushed. And listen, if I can just get them scanned in PDF and emailed to me, that makes my filing much easier. So it's much easier on me. Unfortunate for the person who has to stand there and scan all the documents, right? Because not all documents are 8 by 11, Some of them are little pieces of paper, and some of them are, bigger. They don't just easily go through. So, totally up to them. I'm perfectly happy with whatever they decide. But I'm just saying that don't be fooled by the 10 cents per page rule, and you can make your decision from there. Okay, so can be done. So we got our records requests. It's verbal. You can do electronic. And okay, so timing, right? So I send an email. They are supposed to respond back. I got your email, right? Acknowledge the fact that you sent a records request. And then generally you're looking at 3 days, generally to get a records request. That's what they like to do. It's a reasonable amount of time. If they have to go off-site to get records, or they have to dig through, like what was the one?
So saying to you, like on the video of one of your recent attendance with the commissioners, where Tori says to you, we just don't have time, and we're gonna need you to not do it on days we have commissioner meetings, they should not be doing that.
No, you can,
Okay.
I don't know where it's in here, it's in the beginning where it's very clear that you are not allowed to plead, right? So if you have a mediation, or if you have a mandamus act or something, and the courts are involved, and they say, I just didn't have time, you can't do that. That, it's just thrown out. There is no of that, well, I didn't have it properly filed, or I couldn't get to the documents easy enough. Again,
Not your problem.
you gotta give me something better than that, because your records by law are supposed to be easily retrievable. You're supposed to be able to get them, so it's just a no standing. Now, I mean, I feel that if I'm there during business hours, that they should do their utmost to serve me as a citizen, right? And, you know, I'm not making demands, I'm not saying I need to have it right now today, we can schedule till later in the afternoon. When, as far as the commissioners' meetings, right, they sign a lot of papers, especially on Thursdays, and then Deb has to take those papers, and she files them, and she does whatever her little work is, and it will take, she usually does that during the meeting. By the time you get out of the meeting, which is 11, 12 o'clock, then usually that's all done, right? So your afternoon, you go to lunch, you come back your afternoon, it's pretty much done, I feel, is my experience. And so, if I want a record, or if I want to see something, I have no problem waiting until after lunch, when the bulk of their work is done. We had a really nice relationship where she knew I would come, and I wanted to see the documents that were already approved, so they approved them in the morning, in the meeting that morning, and before she would put them in the journal, I would go up, and then she would show me those, and then they would go in the journal. It was no big deal, it was just easy, and that was just a courtesy, on her part to do that, so, I don't agree with, if I'm there and spending my time, then I would like to at least have some customer service. But, that's all be proven out in the future. If I have to do more records requests, then obviously it's gonna take longer, right? So you're gonna have to do a record request, and then you're not gonna get it for another 3 days, and, it's kind of it makes it harder than just answering a question. Answering a question, you got 30 seconds, it's done, and you're moving on. So it does become cumbersome. Let's go back. So again, like if you go through this book, it'll tell you inspection at no cost during regular business hours, right? And then it has a little paragraph that tells you. So that's why it's like, if you're really interested, this is the book that you want to have. Here is at cost, right? Copies are at cost. There are a few exceptions, like if you're getting medical papers that are bigger pieces of paper, they can charge more because it's special equipment that has to be printed. Like if you want blueprints or something, you're gonna have more there. Hey Mike, what time is it?
There's a comment on
10
here,
till
if you don't
7.
mind me reading it to you when you get
10 till
settled.
7.
Okay, yeah.
Tara Meyer says, unfortunately, you are not factoring many things. Paper is expensive time for me to take the file apart. I work for a different county and I make a decent pay, so the state charges that the libraries charge something, and Staples charge more. Does that make sense to you?
There are different entities that are stated in, so like medical records, like I said, if they're cumbersome, they have their own subset where they can say we can charge more. My feeling is that if it's just a normal county office, and they don't have any provision for that, I don't personally see where they can do that. So, but it's it would be by department. So if she has a special situation where they are charging more and by law they can, then that's what they can do. I don't see for our local county offices that can be done. So so here's a they go into journalists have different laws. You know, there's charts in here, right? So if you're a journalist, you have different access to different things. One thing that's a big, the police, right? The police, public safety people have another huge section that is just specifically for them because they have different issues. I mean, you're talking about body cameras, you're talking about a whole subset of people, not normal public records. That is outside of my scope from the county commissioner's office. We're gonna go law enforcement. Law enforcement is huge. You also have a big thing for like children's cases, you know, adoption cases, anything that deals with children is a whole nother subsection that you're gonna have different rules. One of the big things so that's in the Open Meetings Act. Any questions about
Yes.
records? Just about records.
Yes. What would you say, have your records requests increased because you've had such a hard time just getting questions answered in general, or are you now just doing it because you're looking for information and they won't answer you? I guess, what makes you primarily want to get records requests more?
Yeah, so when you first start out making records requests, you know, it's intimidating, you wanna do the right thing, you wanna say the right, you know, thing, and it's all, and then you ease into it, and, you know, it's like, well, I don't know, I'm just gonna send it, right? And they can figure out if we have this, right? So you get more comfortable with it. You realize that people have different personalities when it comes to record requests, right? What is behind the reason for a difference in personality, that's up to them. That's not, you know, maybe you just think that it's too much on your workload, you know, and it's a burden, I get it. If you take it personal and you feel like it's a, you know, personal attack that you're not doing your job properly, right? So I can't necessarily speak to the different personality reasons, but I can say that there are differences. There are some departments that don't charge you anything, right, for paper copies. You know, 5 pages, no problem. They'll just print it off for you, even in color, right? If by chance that's how it comes out, you know, no big deal. You know, there are other departments where I've heard other people that they just don't charge them at all. It's not worth the time and effort and the burden unless you're talking about a massive amount of paper. It's just a kindness. You just do it. You print it. You know, I'm sure people have all seen videos, you know, kind of these viral videos of people coming in and they ask for something and the person behind the counter is just angry and mad, and you know, it's this big whole ordeal, right? I don't know that I've ever gotten anything that much. I've never been kicked out of a meeting, right? That happens. I've never been shut out of a meeting. I am required to step outside of the commission. So the commissioner's office definitely has changed a lot. They, you know, usually the door is open to the chambers. Now it's kind of closed, which kind of helps because it was always loud out in the office. And so when you're inside, it's nice because it's enclosed and everything's a little bit quieter. But when they have executive sessions, you can't just go to the main office. You have to actually go outside into the hallway, and they have all the doors closed, which I don't think is such a bad idea, right? Because if you would talk too loud in there, you could possibly hear what was going on. They have a big screen TV, so if you have, a teleconference, or they do a lot with, rural law on the TV, you know, maybe the speaker system would be loud. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. It does feel, you know, like they're kicking you out. I had one time where they kicked me out, and then they locked the door to the office because nobody was out there. You know, Tori was gone and Deb was there, so she was in the meeting, and, you know, they had locked the door to make sure nobody would come in, you know. It's fine, you know, it's just the way the room is set up and the staffing, right? They only have 2 people on staff there, so, you know, some people may take offense, you know, but, you know, there's just some things that are gonna happen, so I've not had any of that. The most pushback I've had is probably, well, from the commissioners asking questions, but that's more Open Meetings Act. You know, they've put restrictions on me.
Why?
I don't know, but they put restrictions on me so that I have to write things down, right? And so I made a video earlier that, you know, if I can't just come up to somebody, there are some departments that I go up and I go, oh, I don't understand this document, you know, like, what is this, and can you explain this? And they will sit with me for a long time, you know, maybe longer than they want, but they're always gracious and always willing to just sit down and explain it, sometimes multiple times, because you learn different things, and as you learn this, you come back and you go, okay, how does this work with this, right? So much easier, and it's quick, right? Because you go and get your answers right then and there. If you can't get your answers, then it does become a problem, because now, if I want to know the why of something, and you're not willing to tell me, you know, why this has happened, and it's not in your meeting notes, and it's not in anything that I can see or get my hands on, I can say, well, maybe it's an email, right? I don't know if it's in, I don't know where it's at, but it's got to be somewhere, right? You didn't just make a decision out of nothing, right? There's got to be a why of something. So it's like the fire pump, right? It's a good example that, you know, we say, you know, what was wrong with the fire pump, right? No issue, no real answer. Well, why didn't we fix it? No real answer. It's too much money was the only answer. Well, was it inspected? Right? Who inspected it? Why didn't we fix it? You know, like, you just have all these questions that didn't get answered. And as a citizen, I don't have any other way. So in the Open Meetings Act, you're not allowed to demand to be heard, right? So if they don't want you to speak, then you don't have to speak, right? They don't have to take public comment, don't have to do any of that. And so if you can't persuade them on gentle terms to answer questions of why and how, then, you know, then what I have done is request the emails. Well, I want all the emails that pertain to the fire pump. Then you get to see some conversations, right? You get to see a conversation with Bad Crash, you get to see a conversation with Armor Fire, several different fire inspector organizations, right? So then you get to see a little bit more of the why. You can request the inspection documents. You know, I got the Armor Fire report, right? And so you can reasonably say, once you get enough data, right? You can't, it's not, just one's not gonna get it, right? So you're gonna have to get enough data to say, okay, I feel like I have a good picture of what happened to the fire pump. But even if I have a theory, I can't go to them and force them to tell me, am I right? Like, the fire pump didn't really, it was always bad, it's been bad, but it wasn't red tagged. I never found any document that officially put it out of commission. They said, well, you shouldn't use it. Well, they didn't even say that, they just said you should fix it, you should repair it. And unless there's a document out there that I don't know about, I haven't seen it. So you say, okay, I finally gathered enough information to give me a reasonable expectation of the how or why, and then you just have to go off that. So, it takes a lot of work and effort for everybody involved to just answer a simple question of like, what happened with the fire pump? And then you have a nice conversation and you walk away a happy citizen going, that was too bad. Too bad, wish we could have fixed it, wish it was different, and then you just walk away because you got a reasonable explanation. So yeah, it takes a lot more work to do public records requests. And, I don't think, it is an affront to the person who has to fulfill them, right? Because maybe they don't want, and maybe they don't have any control over it, right? So the people that are gathering the documents aren't the ones who make the decisions, but that's their job to do, right? So it can be messy, I guess that's to say. So there are those different personalities of somebody who's willing to sit down and talk and, free with their information that is public knowledge, and then there are others that aren't, and then there's kind of others that are a little bit on the fence, right? That it's like, okay, I'll give you this, but then that's all I want to hear, right? You're like, okay, and as long as it's enough, then it's enough. You try not to be nitpicky, and what I'm learning, especially with those wishy-washy entities, is to learn to be more specific, right? So it's like if you're asking for those ARPA funds, I really should go and do the research to find out what type of report I'm actually looking for, so that there's not any of that wishy-washy kind of.
Do you think they get that? Do you think that they understand that you're trying to educate yourself and learn? Because I've watched your videos and they just seem annoyed. They just seem irritated and agitated.
Oh, the commissioners?
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
so
they're not one of the wishy-washy ones.
I'm trying to understand that because it's clear to me you're trying to learn and educate yourself, and because you are writing for commissioner, they almost act like they are burdened.
Yeah, I think in some respects, if you're asking questions that maybe they don't know the answers to, or they don't want to divulge the answers behind it, right? I think it can get hard.
You handle it well.
I think some of it has to really come down, I feel, to humility, right? If you're a humble person and you're willing to say, my job is here to serve the people, right? And you're willing to put the time in to sit with a citizen and, well, I don't have to explain this to you, right? You can get that mentality. I don't have to take the time to help you. Well, it takes a humble person to say, this is my time. You are the people that I serve. Mm-hmm. And so it takes a humble person. It takes a humble person, especially with Hardin Hills, to say, if they've made a mistake, right? If somebody's made a mistake, that can be very difficult for people, and that's just a personality. That's not, not everybody can do that. Maybe if you're in public service, if a public service office, you should evaluate that before you go into office, because you're gonna always make a mistake. I mean, everybody's gonna make a mistake, and you should be able to say, we made a mistake and it cost us a lot of money. One of the big things is the Straughter case, right? There were mistakes made. A lawsuit was had out at the Hardin Hills, right? It's a hard pill to swallow. We cost the county a lot of money in attorney fees and a lot of effort. Even just closing Hardin Hills. Rolf Law, if you follow the numbers, it's about $3,000 a month that they're hired to do the legal fees to close it. That's a lot of money.
But that's not including the employee costs that are still out there, the full-time employees that are still there, mowing the grass.
Right. But even just the legal fees of making a mistake are atrocious. There's a, this is an article from Court News, Ohio, and the County Board of Commissioners agreed to pay $6,500 in civil forfeiture, $497,000 in attorney fees, and $23,000 in court costs to the members who sued them for an Open Meetings Act violation, right? Now imagine if a simple act of following your Open Meetings Act saves your county $500,000, right? I mean, with the Strader case, I don't know what the attorney fees were for that, but it was a 2-year case. They had it open for 2 years before they settled. That's a lot of money, right? That we incurred just because there was a mistake made, and they, what they decided, hopefully they did the best interest of the county through that process, but in the end, they settled, and, and we didn't get really anything in return for all that cost. And it was unfortunate that the harm and pain and suffering that was had because of that case, right, is unfortunate that it happened. So, so having open meeting violations is a big deal. It can really cost your county. All right, so if we're done with public records, right, and my main advice for that is, if you want help making a public record request, give me a message, right? We can shoot back ideas back and forth. I can help you with verbiage, don't not send in a request because you're nervous about how you're doing it, right? It's something that once you do it, you can learn how to do it. So, no, it's no big deal. So now Open Meetings Act, which is probably the bigger, if you look at this, right? This is all public records, right? There's lots of definite, this is the Open Meetings Act, but the Open Meetings Act is your biggest issue, right? That is like the thing that, at least in our county, and I know in a lot of counties, causes the biggest heartaches, right? Even though it seems pretty simple, it's pretty small in here. So you're saying and again, the Open Meetings Act is 121.22 is the ORC. And again, it's not very big, it's 4 pages long. So public body, right, of course, is in this case would be your county commissioners. A meeting is a prearranged gathering, right, of the majority of the members of the public body who are discussing and deliberating public business. So you're like 2 words into this saying, and already it's muddy, right, it's messy. And this is my best interpretation, don't take this as legal advice, I'll put that back out there. If you have 2 commissioners, because there's only 3 of them, and you have 2 commissioners who meet, say, at a social event, not a meeting, okay, it's not a meeting, if they happen to slip up and discuss public business, that's a meeting, right? Somebody we need a little elf on the shelf that jumps down and says, okay, meeting's adjourned, is open, and now we have to take meeting notes because now you've entered into public meeting territory, right? It's a big deal, okay? That doesn't usually happen. We don't have elves doing our record keeping for us, unfortunately. We could use them. So you have to be really careful, and I almost see it as, if you're a commissioner, or if you're in a public body, right, that you maybe have to ostracize your other people when you're out in public, because you don't want to happen to slip into official business just because you're thinking or you're just talking, right? That it's sort of like, oh, I'm not gonna do that, because it is a tricky business, and depending on what board you on, right? It's more, when you only have 3 commissioners, it's a big deal. It's really easy to get 2 of you together and now you're a majority, right? It's not like if you're, you know, you've got 7 people on your board and 3 of you are together, you know, you probably shouldn't discuss, business, but it's not a meeting, right? So, I mean, it's a really hard business. I know our commissioners do a lot together, right? They go to different things and are seen together in many places, and we don't know if they're discussing public business or not. You know, are they breaking the Open Meetings Act? I don't know, right? Sometimes that can come back to bite you, right? So that's a meeting. If it says in here, like if you go to a work retreat or you do those things, it doesn't matter what it's called, right? Social hour, it doesn't matter, it's still a meeting, right? They're not, just because you call it something different doesn't affect. Here's another, so now we're gonna be 3 words into it, and the discussion and deliberation of public business. Okay, discussion is an exchange of words, comments, or ideas. Deliberation is the weighing and examination of a reason for and against taking a course of action. Discussion or deliberation does not generally include information gathering, attending presentations, or isolated conversations between employees, right? So, again, it's a really fine line. You can go do information gathering. Like, they could be here and sitting and just gathering information, right? Then they're gonna take that information with them. If they sit here, 2 of them sit here and they gather information and then they have a discussion on it, now that's a meeting, right? But 2 of them can sit here and gather information, right? But you really gotta walk away and go home separately, right? And not to discuss it, okay? So they can attend presentations together, they can go to luncheon meetings and things together, get that information, go back to the office, the public meeting, not just the office. I mean, that's the other thing. Our commissioners have desks, you know, that are all 3 together. How easy is it for 2 of them to show up at work together and just casually have a meeting? And it's not, nobody told you about it, there's no meetings taken for it. And it's like, that's a really dangerous proximity to make that happen. Does it happen? I don't know, I'm not there, I don't know. So the discussion and deliberation, right, that is one of the biggest things I feel we're missing in our commissioners' meetings, or even in other meetings that I've been to, public meetings, that you are to have all your discussion deliberations in the public meeting, right? So they've information gathered, they went home, they thought about it, they come back to the public meeting, right? Public meeting is open, not before public meeting, right? After the public meeting is open. When that topic then gets put on the table, they should be having discussion. Hey, Joe, I went to so-and-so and I saw this presentation and I thought it was a really good idea. What do you think? Oh, you know, Sam, I didn't like it and I didn't think it's a good idea. Well, why not, you know? And so you have, because you have not previously talked to this person about the topic that you information gathered on, right? There was no discussion, so it's natural to come into a meeting and say, well, what do you think? What do you want to do, right? When you don't see that, it makes you wonder, when did you talk about it? When did you get consensus? Was it an email? Was it before the meeting? Was it after the meeting? Was it at your social event? Like, when was it that you realized that you guys had an agreement, right? So what happens a lot of times in our meetings is something will be brought up to vote on, right? You brought up to vote on, and they're like, oh, do you want to vote on this? And everybody says yes, right? And it's like, okay, it's all a yes, right? Or they go into an executive session and they come out of the executive session and it's like, no action taken, no nothing, right? There's no, and it's like, well, when did you deliberate? When was there discussion? And it says in the open meeting, if I can find it, that, so in your meeting minutes, right, which is your legal, it's such an important job. I learned, like a court reporter, right, whatever the court reporter puts in her her log, that is what happened, right? No question. What was said, like if she would do it wrong or if he would do it wrong, then the wrong is recorded, right? And it would be very hard to change that. So it's like a court reporter is the pinnacle of what happened because they hold the legal representation of that court hearing. The same with a clerk, right? A clerk goes in, they are responsible for maintaining the minutes of that meeting, and it's the legal representation. So if you would forget to record a roll call, or if you would forget to document that this happened, right, then it didn't happen, right? And that happens in the court all the time. Well, they voted to go into executive session, not in the meeting minutes. If it's not in the meeting minutes, it didn't happen, right? And especially if you're not recording it, if you're not, I don't know how meeting minutes compared to a recording would be, like which one would win out if they were conflicting. I don't know.
Are the commissioners' meetings recorded?
No, just
No.
personally. Like, I record them when I'm there, but if I'm not there, they're not recorded.
Okay.
But I'm just saying, in a court of law, if you had a meeting minute that said this, but then you have a recording that said this, you know, would the recording win, you know, as a double check to what the meeting was? You know, I don't know, I haven't seen that, so, but the meeting minutes they do not have to be verbatim, right, because that's been a big thing, they're not verbatim, but they do have to document enough information so that a person who wasn't there, who didn't attend, could reasonably discern the meaning and purpose behind the decision, right? So, in order to record your minutes, you have to have the discussion, right? So if you don't have the discussion, then it's not in the minutes, and so your discussion has to be reasonable. There should be enough reasonable discussion to say why you decided on something. I very rarely see that. Once in a while, you'll see discussions happen. They don't usually amount to any decisions, you know, it's just kind of a back and forth kind of talking. But to say that they have a discussion that is say, oh, you know, we need to buy a new refrigerator, you know, which one, oh, you know, back and forth, you know, Samsung, you know, okay, now we're gonna buy the Samsung refrigerator. That's a rarity, I don't usually see that in our meetings. And that's where I personally feel that I think, so it all comes back, right, that if there was more discussion and more deliberation in the meetings that they're giving to us, right, as the public, I probably wouldn't have as many questions as I have, right? A lot of times, you know, is it on purpose? I don't know, I can't discern their motives, but I know that a lot of times when they have things that they sign or they do in the meeting, the title of the document may not be read, right? And so there's like, oh, you know that the document that's in front of you, or you know this thing, and they're like, oh yes, you know, and then they vote on it, and you know, and I'm going, I don't know what thing, I don't have that paper in front of me, I don't know what is being decided on, and it's some of those papers I don't ever see. They don't make it into the journal, or they don't, you know, I don't see them, right? So, especially agreements, like if you have a contract or something that's agreed upon, that they're signing it, I have to go record request that, to see that, you know, so there can be very vague. There's, what was I talking, oh, the discussion, so, oh, if they're talking about, oh, you know, the project, you know, we've been working on it for months and months, and da-da-da, and it's like, I don't know what project that is. I can't, you know, in the past, I've been able to ask questions, you know, hey, what project are you talking about, you know, or, could you clarify, you know, because obviously everybody knows about it, right? Everybody knows what you're talking about, but I don't, and so it's not, you know, forthcoming to the audience of what is being discussed, which, you know, does that come back to an agenda item, you know, where, you know, the agenda should be more clear so that you say, okay, we talked about this, and now we're talking on another point. I don't know, you know, the agendas are pretty much set on so-and-so's coming to the office. You know, the health department's coming, or the sheriff is coming. There's no more than that, so whatever they discuss, I don't know. So it's not like you can follow along. And I will say some people do bring documentation. The Hardin County Chamber of Business Alliance, she will bring a document that she kind of goes through of the points that she has. I'm not privy to that information, right? So, don't usually get that document to be able to follow along. Other people, like different contractors, will bring papers in. Sometimes you get that, sometimes you won't. It is nice though, because then you can follow along with the contract as they're going through, type of thing. So it can be vague. So if you're not explaining yourself well enough in the meeting, it can be hard, because then it asks more questions. So then now I have more questions. Now I have another records request. Now, you know, so it does snowball, unfortunately, where, like I said, I think one simple question can clear it up, you know, really quickly. That's not where we're at this point in time. So we talked about what's a meeting, you know, having your discussions understood. Here's the other part, right? So you may have somebody come in. We're doing the re-roofing at the courthouse, so they come in and they're like, okay, you know, you need to sign this contract and da-da-da-da-da, and it's just always a yes, right? There's no back and forth, or there's no, or somebody will come, the partner will come in and say, oh, I think we should hire so-and-so, or I think we should, you know, do this and that and the other, and it's always, yep, you know, whatever it is that they request, and that's kind of what they get. Or you have other departments that come in and they're like, hey, we need funds, or we need help with this, you know, they politely tell them no, and it's like, oh yeah, you know, sorry, you know, for whatever reason. But just because that department came in and you get a yes or a no from that decision, there's still no deliberation, right? That it says, oh, hey, what do we think that we should give them money for such and such? You know, oh yes, I think we should, and no, we don't have that, and oh, we, you know, better go talk to the auditor. You know, there's none of that. There's just a yes or no, generally, is how it goes. You know, not always, but you'd have to watch the meetings and you can discern that for yourself, but I still feel like we don't have discussion. So there was a big thing recently, what time is it?
25 after 7.
Okay, there's a big thing recently with the meeting notes, and you know, I could be totally wrong, and I can admit that, right? I really felt that they had the agendas and the meeting notes on the website, and that was the way that they presented. They needed to do that to present to the public what was going to be on the agenda, because a public person, their meetings are from 9 in the morning till 4 o'clock in the evening, right? That is a huge, they usually only last until lunch, maybe a 1 o'clock meeting, right? It's never until 4 o'clock, not that I've ever seen. I've never been there at that time. What I usually like to have them do, especially when it's recorded, is that when the meeting's done, I ask them if they're done for the day, right? And they'll say, oh yes, we're done for the day. And I'll say, okay, that's the close of the meeting, right? So I feel that they're not coming back after lunch, or they're not coming back at another time. But they hold very staunchly that the regular meeting is open from 9 to 4. So if they say the agenda's clear, you don't have anything on the agenda, and they've all left, they all went home, right? They leave, nobody's in the office. If they need to come back because somebody needs an official decision on something, all 3 of them can just pick up, come right back into the office at 3 o'clock, have a meeting, make official decisions, and be done, right? So what I've been told is that because I say I wanna be there when an official decision is made, right? Because that's what I'm there for, right? Is
Right.
to be there during the public meeting. And they say I can sit there all day if I want, but they're going home. They're going home.
I've seen it on your videos. I've seen it.
They've said it on the videos, that they're going home, and I'm welcome to stay there all day if I want to catch them coming back to the office for another meeting. I'm like, I can't do that, I mean, that's not reasonable.
It's all
And,
good.
and they don't have any seating out in the main office, and I'm also not allowed to be in the chambers by myself. I'm not sure where I'm supposed to go to sit for this public meeting. I hold personally for Robert's rules that if you break a quorum, which Robert's rules is not required to be used, it is highly recommended that you use Robert's rules. They use Robert's rules for the beginning of their meetings, right? Just not for the end of them. They never adjourn their meetings, ever. Never, it's never adjourned, because it always is open till 4. I asked them once, just kind of fun. I asked them once if they come back at 4 o'clock to adjourn the meeting, right? Like, you should come back, if it's open till 4, come back to the office, right? Adjourn the meeting and then go home. But they said they didn't do that either.
They can't just change meetings from like a few hours on Tuesday and Thursday instead of a 9 to, or whatever it is, 9:30, what is it, 9:30 to 4 or something?
9 to 4, yeah.
They can't just set,
I don't know.
shorten the time, so
I would
that's,
think that you would shorten the time. I mean, most council meetings, you're talking about an hour, hour and a half is a
Yeah.
long meeting. I've been to some meetings that are 3 hours long, and it's a long time, right? But in those 3 hours, you are having a meeting from the very start to the very end. You're not going home in the middle of the meeting and saying, we'll come back at 8 o'clock and finish the meeting, right? I've never heard of meetings that are just open-ended, that you can come back at any time. So in Robert's rules, which they don't necessarily, like I said, they know that they start with Robert's rules, but they don't do all of Robert's rules. That, what's I gonna say? That they don't have to adjourn the meetings. Oh, that's what I was gonna say, is that when you break a quorum for Robert's rules, right, so like 2 of the commissioners would leave, because 2 commissioners would be a quorum, right, so you're down to 2. If one of those leaves, then it's the responsibility of the chair, or whoever's the next highest person, to then adjourn the meeting and set a new time for the next one, right? So if you break a quorum, and I know watching the House and Senate, ordeals on TV, that, you're like, we don't have a quorum, and everybody's waiting, like, we gotta get, people are like running into the chambers, before the time ends, because you have to have a quorum, and if you lose the quorum, then it's closed down and you gotta go home.
the other issue is these daytime meetings.
Yeah, daytime meetings,
Normal, everyday, average Joes are working. Can't go to, I would love to be at commissioners' meetings and ask questions and be a part of things and be on the agenda. I can't do it at 10 o'clock in the morning when I'm working.
right.
So
No,
sometimes their weeks are half day on
Many times.
Tuesday and half day on Thursday, and then they leave. And they call that working full-time,
Yes.
working their hours.
So, yesterday, they had a big day, and they had people every half an hour coming in. So they had to work all the way from 9 to, I think it was like 12:30. Wow, was it 12:30? I'm not sure, it was pretty close.
They probably have Hardin County beautiful.
So they had people come in, one right after another, right? That sometimes people were waiting in the hallway if a meeting went over. So that's what you think is a meeting, right? A lot of times if you have a meeting, you can watch the videos. I mean, the videos are 2-3 hours long, and you'll have somebody come in for 10-15 minutes, and then you'll have a break, right? Until the next half hour, you have another person, or maybe somebody doesn't come in, and now you've got an hour. I mean, I've waited, 45 minutes many times between people coming in. So to say that they're working a full half day, right?
Is putting it,
Yeah, I wouldn't say, because a lot of times you say, oh, well, they're working on their computer. Well, a lot of times they're not.
But they have lunches and other meetings and things. That's
Yes.
so, I mean, and the
Yeah.
pictures for the paper.
And those
That matters.
are open to the public also. So I did go to Keep Hardin County Beautiful, right, which was my first one, because a lot of times I have to go, I'm like, I gotta get home, I don't have time to go sit through a lunch meeting. But it is a monthly report, right? So when you think about the commissioners that, I mean, I think of them kind of as secretaries, right? They have a lot of people come in, you know, maintenance guy comes in, gives a report. Sheriff comes in, gives a report. The chamber comes in, gives a report, right? So they're just kind of receiving these reports, not necessarily making decisions on what's going on in those entities, but they are overseeing them. You know, maybe they're giving approval for, you know, the levies or the budgets or appropriations, those kind of things. But it's a lot of just receiving people. And so you go to the luncheons, you know, that's just the way for those people to give the report. But here's the problem, right? Here's my problem, is that when they have a luncheon, it's not in the meeting notes, right? It is them, right? So Keep Hardin County Beautiful, that's just the one that was recent, right? They had a lunch at the Elks, right? But if she would have come into the meeting and given maybe, we don't have the clerk go to the luncheon with them, so that,
It's on, we got 20%.
so that the meeting can be recorded, so that that report can be recorded. You know, I think that would be a good thing to have. I'd also like to see all the subcommittees have reports all the way up to the parent committee. So that's another thing of your record requests and your open meetings, is that just because you have a subcommittee, right, so you have the commissioner's office, and they have departments under them, and they have boards under them, those all have to abide by the Open Meetings Act, public record requests, right? And so my feeling, just personally, is that I would like to see that all bundled into one. So when I come to get my meeting minutes, that the meeting minutes show me all the things that go on with the government that is under this umbrella. That's probably never gonna happen, but it is a wish. Then you get a really good idea as a citizen, of what's going on. So really quick, we're gonna end here with the most controversial topic, and that's executive sessions, right? Which is what I talked about,
My favorite.
where's that lawsuit that I put up, here. So we sort of started out with this lawsuit of the executive session. And so we're gonna end with that. And executive sessions are really tough, right? And that's why I say there's a lot of legislation that's kind of happening to maybe tighten up those parameters for the executive sessions, because they're kind of willy-nilly, right? I mean, I feel like, and they are abused terribly, not just here, like just everywhere, right? Because people, there are, let me get to that point. There are, Ann, you'll be mad, is there 8 executive sessions?
I don't know, I just know it's annoying. Like, why is everything an executive session? That's what it feels
so
like.
1,
It
2,
feels
3,
like.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 9 reasons to go into executive sessions, okay? There's only a couple of them that are commonly used. G1, so if you look at the Open Meetings Act paper, right, you're gonna get your letters. Let me see if I can find it here. No. Anyways, it's gonna be in there, so it's gonna be under G and then G1, there's 9 of them. That's gonna be for personnel matters, right? And you see this a lot. you have a gripe with somebody, you don't want it aired, and so they're gonna take that into executive session, and an hour later, you've aired all your grievances, and now you come back out of executive session and you say, we're fired, they're fired, whatever. But it's to protect that person, it's not to go in and just, executive sessions are not just to be a place to hide all your discussion. That is not what it's supposed to be. And so you really should take whatever the grievance is, that personnel issue, you need to go and say, that's the one small thing that you're gonna talk about, and then everything else that doesn't pertain to that has to be done in public meeting. You may not like it, it may not be comfortable, it may not be what you wanna do, but that's what the law tells you you need to do. There's a thing in here, a proper procedure for executive session. It says a motion must specify which of those specific matters it will discuss. Example, I move to executive session to consider the promotion and compensation of a public employee. It is not sufficient to say personnel, right? Which is really what happens in most places, that they're like, oh, we're going into G1, personnel, right? And so they're not giving enough reason. You need to say, okay, we're going into executive session for the discipline of an employee. When you're in that executive session, you only can talk about what the discipline of that employee. If you start talking about their house or their dog or the way that they do their job or something else that you didn't like about them, no, not permitted, right? You're stuck to what you say. Now you can put multiple things. You can say, I'm gonna talk about the quality of the work and the personnel and the discipline or whatever your reasons are. You can talk about all those things in executive session in one go. You don't have to go and then come back and have a new reason and go back again. But you do have to state all the reasons why you're in there. And I think that really trips up a lot of people because you think, well, I can just, we're in here, we'll just go ahead and discuss it. You don't do that. Where I feel like it gets really hard with enforcing it is that they don't take meeting minutes in there, right? It's not recorded. So how are you gonna prove that you talked to somebody else? And like this case here is that they had people who testified that said, hey, we talked about other stuff, right? We had other things outside of the purchase of that equipment. Well, it was dismissed in the case. Well, you can't listen to that, right? It's not, that's how I interpret it. If I read it wrong, that's on me. But, so that they didn't want to hear that testimony, right? Because they're like, no, they said they were talking about purchasing equipment, and we believe them 100%. And I know everybody in government, when they say what they're gonna do, behind closed doors is always what they say they're gonna do, right? That's just how it works. And so, not a very trustworthy system to, the person that you're inquiring about, if they say, no, I didn't talk about anything else other than what was on that list, right now you have to just believe what they say, right? There's very little recourse at this time. Hopefully that's gonna change in the future, to make that stricter, right? Now you can catch people, right, in, public records requests, like if you say, oh, you've done this, and it proves that you talked about that in the meeting, then you have outside ways to prove that, right? But you have to get that information. It's very difficult. So there is one drawback to that. You don't have any evidence to what's being discussed, but it is very fishy, right? When you go into, let's say, the purchase of G2, right? The purchase of property, unused and unwanted property, which is what we've used a lot for Hardin Hills, right? Oh, we're going to sell Hardin Hills. We're going to get rid of the thing. So anything that we do that pertains to Hardin Hills and the sale of that property or the beds is under executive session. No problem. Easy peasy. Yeah, so then you can just go hide in your executive session. And it says in here, G2 is not meant to hide. I didn't write it down. You're not meant to use G2 as a way to circumvent the law, right? It even tells you that. And yet, that's what most people do. Now, the ruling on this case is the little comma that I was talking about, is that if to go into the G2, you have to show, you're going in there, so you have something to sell, right? You're like, oh, we have land to sell. We don't want anybody to know how much it's valued at, but I need to tell you how much it's valued at. So let's go into executive session, and we'll come over here and we'll say, okay, it's worth $15,000 an acre. Got it? You're like, okay. All right, now we can come back out, and now we can maybe discuss other parts of that discussion, you know, that economic development type things. But we don't have to mention how much the land is valued, because that's quite, because if a buyer hears that we're valuing at $15,000, that's gonna give them an unfair advantage to get that property, right? Because now they know something, right? So that's what it's used for, an unfair advantage to the sale of that property. If you're not talking, what you're discussing in executive session does not give an unfair advantage to the sale of that property, then it's not executive session, right? And that's what they ruled on, is that it has to, the unfair advantage applies to the whole thing. And so, it's a big deal. So in this case, they bought iPads for the election board, right? But then they had some questions, and so they decided they're gonna go back into executive session after they decided they're gonna purchase these iPads. And so they go back into executive session later on, and they discuss, you know, if it was a good idea or something about Dominion and whatever. And then they come out and they're like, no, we're gonna keep them. That's not executive session, because you've already purchased the iPads, right? So there's no unfair advantage to be had, because you've already purchased them. So therefore, you can't go into executive session under G2 to make that discussion. Now this just came out of the Supreme Court of Ohio, right? And so now it has to be remanded down into the court system, right? So it's just going through its process. It's not a done deal yet, but that is revolutionary to the G2 executive sessions, because it's gonna change a lot of things, because you can't just say, we're just gonna discuss everything, right? So it will have big implications. So personnel is number one. G2, like I said, is the sale of property. Number 3 is the pending or imminent court action. Now this one I'm a little confused on, because we don't have that. Now we do have several times where the prosecutors come up and they have pending court action, like the Schroeder case had a lot of pending court action, and they have the meeting right there in the office, and they cite client-lawyer privilege, right? So I don't know how client-lawyer privilege fits with pending legal court action, because what I read down here is that that you need to do that in the courtroom, right? So it's like, well, if you're doing that in the courtroom, then how are you doing it in the chambers? And what's the parameters on that? So that one's outside of my reach at this point, but something interesting, because then you can't always, just because you're having a discussion with your lawyer, doesn't mean you can hide it in executive session, right? There are parameters that you should be able to talk about, outside of that. Matters required to be kept confidential, so this is a new one. We had a G5 on Tuesday's meeting, and that was about it was the health board, and we have TB cases. So I know that we had one tuberculosis case that Kirby had come in and asked for money from the commissioners, because the commissioners have to pay anything that the health department can't fund to take care of a TB case, because it's a big deal, right? They couldn't do their regular activities at the health department because they had to run out twice a day to this person to make sure they got their medication, because it's you have to be there. I forget what it's called. That you have to be there to watch them personally take this medication, because it's a health hazard, right? So if that person, and you can even go to the fact of you can be put on house arrest, right? If you say, oh, you have to stay home, you have tuberculosis, you have to take your medication, and you just go out wandering around wherever you want, and they're like, now you're not allowed to do that, they'll put you on house arrest, you're not allowed to leave your house, right? Because they don't want an epidemic happening, right? Because it does spread. Now, it's something that is usually contained in the United States, but we are seeing it, right? We're seeing it now. So they were there asking for funds because they were like, look, we need $12,000 because we've lost all this revenue from not being able to do our clinics because we are just constantly, have all this things to do. So I know of that one, and then Tuesday, we were informed that there's another one that was just confirmed. So they said that they had a tuberculosis case that was confirmed and then immediately went into a G5 executive session, right? Which of course, they cited HIPAA, which it's like, well, they talked about the TB case before, and now they're not allowed to. And so I had asked them why just exclude the HIPAA information, but evidently there's bigger. So what G5 is the public body may adjourn into executive session to discuss matters that are federal law or regulations or state statutes require the public body to keep confidential. Right? So if there's another law out there, then they can go into executive session under that G5. I would like to know which law they're using, cite which law it is that you use to say, okay, this is the law that we're then going to executive session. I haven't got that far, it was just on Tuesday, right? But it was about the TB case. So we have at least 2 of them in the county, which our health department is having a hard time anyways. They don't have hardly any staff, they don't have any money, and now they've asked for money for the first one, and now we have another one. And those can take, when you first started, it sounds like they have to go out twice a day, right? There's requirements, and then it got moved down to just 1 a day, and now those cases can go on for a year, right? So it's a whole year that you're legally mandated by the state of Ohio to track these cases and, follow them because it's such a health interest of our community. So that was a new one. I had never seen that one used before, but they were right on it. As soon as she come in, Fred asked if she wanted to go into executive session, and she said yes, and he said G5, and they were off on the races, right? No other discussion on it other than that, which I don't know how he knew that she wanted to go into a G5, but he knew. He already knew. Number 6 is security matters. So let's say you have, so one of the things is if you know how you keep a building secure, right? You don't want that to be public because now everybody knows where you're hiding, right? Like you have your security cameras or you have your guards out there or whatever, that stuff has to be confidential so that you thwart the bad guys, right? So that's 6. 7 is hospital trade secrets. I don't know what those are, but I'm sure hospitals have those. Number 8, confidential business information of an applicant for economic development assistance, right? So that's application, Veteran Service Commission applications, right? So those are your answers of where you can go into executive session. There's not a ton, but it's a big deal, and I hope to see more stringent regulations, and at least, I feel like there should be at least a record of what was discussed, right? And keep it confidential so that if there's ever any question, it can be unsealed and then revealed what it is that was discussed, but that's not the case so far. Real quick, we talked about the records request, that if you don't get your records, you can request a mandamus action to go through the courts, and that's evidently very easy. I've not done it yet. They've not gotten me to a point where I haven't gotten what I needed, and so that's a really good place to be. Now, I don't know about anybody else, if they've ever done it. I don't know. I'd like to know how that went. If you have a violation of the Open Meetings Act, then you can file, you can get an injunction. So that goes through your common pleas court in the county where the action happened, right? You don't have to have a lawyer, right? So if you just wanna go as your own person and file the, injunction, then, you know, you go through the process. I don't recommend it, I wouldn't do it personally, I would definitely have somebody on your side to help you with that. And it is a tricky situation, because of course, if you're going to be, filing against your own local government, right, and your own local prosecutors, that, you know, that's a bit of a tricky situation, because, you know, it's not looked upon as being very kindly. And so, just, you know, it is something, if you file an injunction, or, you know, you get that through the court system, they will pay your lawyer's fees, right? So if you win in court, right, so you say, okay, we really need to do this, but I can't afford it, and if you have a really good case, right, ideally, they're gonna pay you $500 for every, violation, right? And you can do multiple violations, so if you have 10 violations, right, that's a chunk of money, that $5,000 that you'll get, so you say, oh, you know, $500 isn't that big a deal, no big problem, you know, until you get a few of them, right, until you rack them up. I saw somewhere where somebody had $40,000 that they had to pay because of $500, you know, so it will add up, you know, type of thing. And then they have to pay your reasonable your court costs and your reasonable attorney fees, right? So these laws are self-help, they call them self-help, so that if you win, then you get the prize of not having to be out any money. A lot of time and effort, I'm sure, but, so those are experiences that I've dealt with in Hardin County, you know, it's, I'm sure gonna be different for everybody, and, I'm hoping that we never have to go to any of those ramifications, you know, that we can all learn to get along and be along, and, I really encourage everybody that if, you know, to go and do your records acts and know, so when you go to a meeting, right, you at least have a little bit of information on what you should expect and where you are, but you always have to do, you know, get to know this book, right? Like, I learned a lot just reading lawsuits. They teach you a lot about the ins and outs and the nitty gritty of the, you know, the law, you know, and how a court might look at it, so. But it is there, and I just, you know, wanted to share that with you guys. Do you guys have any questions about the Open Meetings Act? No? All right, well, I appreciate you guys sticking with me. I know it's a lot of information, and I just hope that you guys learned a little, and, you know, we'll keep on. Thank you.
Finish?